Hello, creative spirits. Welcome to a very special edition of your creative and magical life. This is our first episode exploring books, two books specifically. And I'm really excited. It's a very timely time to be getting into this conversation. We are going to be talking about Parable of the Sower and Parable of the Talents, two linked novels by Octavia Butler that people have been talking a lot about lately. You may have seen, if you're on the Instagrams, some posts, quotes, things like that. And we're going to go deep. We're going to go deep with these books. They are very much alive and relevant to what we're living through at the moment. This podcast is being recorded on January 20th, 2025, the day of a very ominous inauguration and also Martin Luther King Day. I have with me two amazing guests that I'm so excited to get into this book with. And I want to set it up. I'm going to introduce them in just a moment. They're going to remain a mystery for just a moment longer. Unless you've read the show notes, they're probably going to be in there. But before we get into it, I just want to set the stage. We're going to be talking about these books however we want to talk about them. So I can't promise you, like, there are definitely going to be spoilers, so we can really get into it. If you've heard a lot about the books and you're like wondering if you should read them, the answer is yes. But if you're still not sure, you can listen to this podcast and make that determination. If you have read them, this will be hopefully really rich and exciting for you. And if you think you'll never read it, but read either of them, but you're curious and want to know more of this conversation will also, I think, fill in a lot for you. And yeah, we'll try to distinguish between the two books when we can, but we're going to be talking about a longer narrative. This conversation may go on for a while. There's a lot to cover. So I think those are the caveats, the information you need to know. Yeah, I'm really excited now to turn to our our mystery guests who will no longer be a mystery. I'm going to invite y'all to introduce yourselves. Ladies first.
Hello, hello. I'm very happy to be here. This is my second time on the podcast, and my name is Ebony Isis Booth. I am a liberatory coach and cultural strategist, and also I don't know, a student of Octavia E. Butler, the prophetess and great thinker and writer. And I'm excited to engage in this conversation today. I think that's all I want to say about who I am. So we can talk more about the books.
Yes, previously appeared on the High Priestess episode, very appropriately. Clearly a descendant of Octavia E. Butler in your
Yes.
in your work. And to the gentleman.
Hi everyone. My name is Evan Narcisse. I'm a writer, narrative designer, and storyteller who works in comics, video games, animation, um, and very much the focus of my work is trying to create a more full representation of Black humanity and the media forms that I work in. And yeah, that's it. You may have seen my work in places like Rise of the Black Panther from Marvel Comics, Batman Gotham Knights, Gilded City from DC Comics, Marvel Spider-Man, which was a Sony PlayStation exclusive, and a bunch of other stuff. You can Google me if you care, but that's what you need to know from me now.
Thank you so much for being here. I am so excited to hear your thoughts on these incredible works of fiction. And I thought we would start. I'd love to hear from y'all your like personal experience with these books when you encountered them, read them, what they did for you the first time or the second time or however many times. Yeah.
Yeah, I can start. I first read Parable of the Sower when I was still in college. The book came out in 93, and I think I read it in either 94 or 95. And to be quite honest, like it didn't grab me at first. I bounced off of it really hard because, as a comic book and science fiction nerd who grew up off of like superheroes and Star Trek and that kind of stuff, I wanted more action. I wanted more like, you know, hyperbolic escapism, and these books don't give you that. They're very grounded, and if they felt, a little bit dry to me, a little bit underrealized, when weighed against my expectations. And, I hadn't touched the books again until last summer during a road trip out to West Texas and put them on to listen to the audiobook, at least Parable of the Sower, and was blown away by how, oracular and prophetic and prescient some of the plotting and situations that Octavia put forth in the book were, but also how emotionally honest and perceptive they were too. The books are told in first person narration with switching viewpoints from different characters, and um, they all feel like very organic to the situations. It doesn't feel like there's a lot of stunt plotting or anything like that, where the author is making something crazy happen just to uh, kind of play to expectations or create drama. The drama all feels like it comes out of the world building and how the characters move through that world that Octavia built. And that to me is the most honest and impactful kind of storytelling, where you're obviously speaking to the cycle of history and all these other things that are clearly apparent in the novel, but doing so in a way that doesn't feel like it's cheating the fiction making of it all, where clearly there's a goal for this book to exist in a capitalist commercial marketplace, but it doesn't feel like she's betraying the characters in that aim. This is a book that kind of was a cult classic for many years and then became understood as like one of the foundational texts of Afrofuturism. And I think the high regard it is held in now came later in life. This is not something I think that happened very much as the books were being published. There were some positive notices, but I think the way we talk about it now was not the way people talked about it upon release. And that's my personal experience with those books.
Thank you. Ebony, what was your experience?
Yeah, I came to Octavia Butler first and then kind of stumbled into the Parable series. So Kindred was my first experience with Octavia Butler. And I remember reading Kindred and being like, this isn't science fiction. Like, this is just this is a Black story. This is just a story that a Black lady is telling, you know? I didn't really, I never really looked to science fiction as a genre because I didn't see myself represented in it. And so it made it really difficult for me to enjoy it. And this was, I want to say, maybe 2010, 2012. And at the time, I don't think I was having conscious relations or conscious conversations about Afrofuturism. So this idea that, that Black people are from the future, and also there are Black people in the future, and therefore we deserve to see ourselves elevated in these ways, was really kind of new for me. So I went deeper into Butler looking for more proof of Afrofuturism in texts, in narrative works that felt like I could be in them. So when I opened Parable of the Sower and I was like, oh, this is a 15-year-old preacher's kid who, is the girl child in this family, the family dynamic of her mom being having been deceased and having a stepmom who is also not black. You know what I mean? These biracial brothers who are also like the family dynamic and the social setting of what was happening in her cul-de-sac and the origin, I was locked in immediately. So I was like, I need to see what this is. Additionally, I think I was super drawn to the fact that, and we can touch on this later about some of the things that I get frustrated about being overlooked in in the Parable series is this same teenager, this little black girl, this young woman is writing doctrine. She's creating religion. She's shaping God in these very explicit ways through her journal. And there was something about the way that that felt um, powerful, like empowering, and not in a way of like power over, but power within. Um, that completely compelled me to be like, I'm locked in. And I continued to revisit Octavia Butler in undergrad. I took a course, Octavia Butler Myth and Magic, which really delved a lot deeper into um, the essence of her work, but also talked a lot about the struggle as a science fiction writer that she was experiencing with misogynoir, with being a Black woman of a certain age and complexion and the aesthetic, in addition to the professional limitations she was experiencing being in competition with, predominantly white male science fiction authors who were constantly, discrediting or arguing the validity or quality of her work. Um, I was like, where have you been all my life? So from there, I just kept reading Wild Seed and Fledgling and um, the Pattern Master and the Lilith's Brood series, and continuing to be like floored by um, how she how I could locate myself in each of these texts in worlds that are in the future, in the past, present, and future. This just temporal plane of being able to jump back and forth through something that felt so real and good without feeling uh, it without feeling the pressure of anti-blackness that I feel in like this reality of being in America 2025. I I didn't feel like that needed to be explicitly named, or that wasn't a resistance that I felt like I was fighting in seeing myself in the characters that Butler writes. I'm not sure if that makes sense, but that was just a thing. There was a certain level of ease in sliding into feeling seen without having to resist or brace myself against the anti-blackness barrier of misogynoir that is so present in much pop culture content and things that I navigate and trying to entertain and educate myself. So yeah.
Yeah, if I can just follow up on what you're saying, Ebony, it's like, and this is coming from a place of like, also like feeling complimented, that's complimented with an E, where like, oh, okay, this is something that completes you. Like, a lot of times when you're reading genre work, whether it's horror or science fiction or superhero stuff or whatever, cowboy fiction, you're like, oh, okay, here's a black character. Does this author or storyteller care about us, love us,
Mm,
know us like experientially? Um, and that's always something, a process that's running in the back of your mind when you're engaging with this work. And like with Octavia, I feel like she pretty much gives you the answer in the text, right? Like, um, she's writing from her experience and the experience of people who live like her, but also with a deep, like, social understanding of the histories that inform different cultural experiences, right? So, like, she gives you all of that, and it is like, oh, okay, a weight off your chest as a reader when you're engaging with those texts. So, I just want to like big you up on that because that's also something that I don't think I articulate when I think about the way I love these books, but like you hit it spot on.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah, not having to do that's extra labor. It's more work to do. In, one of the ways that I think, you know, racism, classism, sexism, whatever the isms tend to be impediments and distractions from our humanity, right? Which is just like, I want to read the book, I want to watch the movie, I want to make the art, I want to dance, I want to sing the song. So when you have to like, feel around for that nuance to be like, is this a safe space? That can make it a little less enjoyable. So I appreciate that.
Speaking of a perhaps more definitely a more positive ism, since you both invoked Afrofuturism, I'd love for us to bring that out, for y'all to bring that out, talk about how you conceive of that cultural and artistic movement. How would you describe it to people who are kind of new to the term or not super familiar with it? And I'm curious too, like you talked a little bit about this, Ebony, but like kind of your entry into that world and how, it informs so much of both of your work, but how you kind of think about that in what you do. Yeah, can we kind of set that table and tell us a little bit about your relationship to that
Mm.
movement?
Yeah. I guess I'm a newbie of well, to the I guess to the language of having a conversation around like Afrofuturism is blah 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 blah. You know what I mean? Like I said before, there are Black people in the future. Black people are from the future. Um, I feel like the concept of Afrofuturism is one where we're using like narrative elements to bring the way that Black culture interacts with science and technology and space. And so it's like, I envision whiteness kind of being like, oh, Black people pay attention to these things too. And it's like, yeah, we do. So, excuse me, I have, I have I guess, a relationship to um, I guess anything. Well, like for instance, I have Uhura on my wall back here. Uhura, it's kind of got a glare on it, but Uhura is dancing with Spock. The reason being, that was the first interracial kiss that was. Oh, interestingly enough, it's Martin Luther King Jr. Day. That was the first interracial kiss that was ever broadcast on television in the United States of America. Was on Star Trek, and that had to do with um, Nichelle Nichols having a conversation with Martin Luther King where he told her, I watch Star Trek to see you because Black people are in the future there on Star Trek. Like, you know what I mean? Like the full circleness of these conversations that seem so random, but are actually really essential and insular. And the way that like humanizes Martin Luther King. I see him sitting in his living room writing a speech, watching Star Trek and being proud of Nichelle Nichols being a Black woman on this show, being, on the command deck of this spaceship in the future. That shit matters. You know what I mean? So Afrofuturism, from something just like that one example to the concept of like time travel or just the temporal realities of Black people being everywhere on the planet. Like at any given time, there's always at least one Black person in the room. And shout out to you if you are the only Black person in the room, but you're never really alone because we are everywhere. We just live in a society that tricks us into this use of Afro pessimism or this idea that Blackness only exists inside the confines of like a hierarchical structure where being Black is bad, right? So these two things kind of butt up against each other, and it's like, no, space is the place. Black is lit. Sun Ra, you know what I mean? Like there's a joy that is that lives in Afrofuturism where I can see myself uninhibited by the confines of racialization. Um, that makes me feel freer. And I enjoy being able to witness any pop cultural, visual, sonic meditation on that experience. It's really important to me.
Um, is it my turn?
Yeah.
Uh, uh, Yeah, I mean, plus one to everything you said, Ebony, like without getting to formal definitions off of like Britannica.com or Wikipedia or anything else, and not to knock those. I feel like Afrofuturism is about like again, imagining black people into the future, but it's also like a lens through which we can examine the past and the present, right? Like the present, preparing for these futures, you know, dismantling, reimagining, subverting like dynamics that would deny us futures. The past. How did our ancestors get through their lived experiences with dignity and resilience, ingenuity, and how might we carry some of those methodologies forward? So it really is like um, a reimagination, if not like an outright refutation of time and its strictures, because this is so often fictional work. We can do like the wholesale world building that imagines us in different spaces and times and circumstances, and not being the objects that are acted upon in a story to further someone else's narrative, but having the narrative center on us. So, I feel like with the billion-dollar success of the Black Panther movie, and yes, full disclosure, I'm somebody who works in the Black Panther industrial complex, as one of my friends said a while back. But with the movie making all that money and all this awareness, coming off the success of the movie, I feel like the term gets thrown around a lot, but um, ultimately, I feel like it's about like recognizing the holistic connectivity of our experiences across different like paradigms. One of the great things that happens after the Black Panther movie came out was, hey, black people across the diaspora were talking about their different experiences and the connections and the differences. And the work of white supremacy is to silo us, is to separate us and fracture us and turn us against each other. So I think finding community in the black diaspora and moving forward to whatever futures we want to try and embody is part of what Afrofuturism is about, like, and I feel like that is so present in these books, you know, like you said before, Ebony, Octavia is writing doctrine in this, she's imagining a religion. And what's great about the way she does it is that it is communal. It is focused on care and survival and joy. Um, you know, it strikes me as very funny. I was having a conversation recently about how I first learned about Scientology. Was through those goofy commercials like in the 80s and 90s about Dianetics. And then later on, you learn that L. Ron Hubbard was a science fiction author. And it's like, well, what kind of religion did you make? And what kind of religion did Octavia imagine? And I think the difference in those things, where one is very hierarchical and secretive and manipulative, um, and here's hoping they don't come for me, and the other one is not. And I think that's Afrofuturistic at its core.
Beautiful. Thank y'all for those perspectives. And we're going to be coming back to that, I imagine. It weaves throughout both of these narratives. It is rooted in Afrofuturism. And before we go further, however, I think we should probably give a lay of the books for anyone who needs a review or hasn't read them or just doesn't know. So, yeah, there's a lot of, they cover a big long time span. The first book begins in 2024, I believe, and the second book ends in 2090, though it kind of really culminates in like 2035, and then there's like a future epilogue. Um, but yeah, what can we say about what the book's about? What's happening? Who's in it? And then we'll talk about why it's such a talked about book in this moment. Who wants to go first?
I can try and do a synopsis, at least of maybe both books.
Oh
We'll probably have
gosh.
to build on each other. No. Um,
No, you do. Yeah, go. I'm interested. You go first. I don't want that
Okay.
job.
yeah, it's the former journalist and critic in me that always has this impulse. Tell people about the thing. Um, so the main character of these books is Lauren Oya Elamina, a young woman who we meet in her teenage years. I think she's 15. Um, orphaned, her lost her mom, still has her dad, and she possesses a special ability called sharing, where she can sense the pain of other people around her. So if somebody gets punched or stabbed with a knife, it's like she's getting stabbed, and there's, you know, all the kind of shock and deleterious effects of personal injury that she feels. And we meet Lauren, like Cecily said, in the near future, well, it was the near future when it was written in 93, but where there are various social and political and cultural changes that are bringing the United States to America to like a reckoning and almost like a Great Depression type scenario where money's becoming worthless, people are becoming desperate, society's collapsing slowly in fragments, and she has to deal with all of that while also hiding her special ability, what makes her more vulnerable to all these different kinds of threats. And it's the story of her coming of age as society collapses around her, and in response to this slow moving collapse, which accelerates throughout the course of the books. In response to that, she comes up with a philosophy and a doctrine, like Ebony said, called Earthseed, which is basically a new religion that seeks to chart the way forward towards a new society with the ultimate goal of helping humanity reach the stars and seed new planets with humanity while leaving behind some of the more toxic histories and behaviors that doomed people on Earth to near extinction in the first place.
That was rather concise and very powerful. Ebony, do you want to add on to this?
Nailed it. No, I feel that is complete. Yeah, I I'm with it.
Yeah. Short answer, essay question, A plus. Yeah, and so, she will face many trials and tribulations. Her community is assaulted and she is like sent, she must go out into the world, which is something she wanted to do or dreamed of doing, but is suddenly forced to do. And does like come across some old friends, but is trying to like travel elsewhere. And at the end of the first book, she has kind of like a community around her that she's kind of assembled walking the highways. And they've all started to like become curious and understanding of this doctrine that she's created. And then in Parable of the Talents, there's this whole new setting where this community is established and there are different kinds of threats. And yeah, the plots of these books are incredibly crafted. There is always like something else around the corner, always something under threat. And yeah, so let's get into like some of the alignments, some of the prophetic nature of these books. There are many things in this world that Lauren Olamina is navigating that feel very recognizable to humans living today. So let's get into that laundry list, shall we?
Yeah. Well, so I have noticed, I remember it was this past summer. I was on Threads and it was July 20th. And the girls were like, today is Saturday, July 20th. This is the day of Octavia Butler. This is like, gotta read Parable of Sower. This is the book. You know what I mean? Because of the prophetic nature of some of the characters, such as a presidential candidate who ends up becoming elected, whose slogan is Make America Great Again. That was kind of one of those first um, points of, I guess, alarm that sent people being like, oh, Octavia Butler is a prophet. And it's like, wait a minute, y'all, you haven't even read the book yet. Like you you don't even, you're not, we're getting a little ahead of ourselves there. But I think it was the alignment of seeing that we are in 2024 and 5 now at this current time, experiencing so much change in our own levels of societal collapse, to use your word, Evan. Like, it's difficult to not see the parallels that we experience here in the plot of, environmental disasters increasing, drug use being rampant, new drugs that some are based off experimentation, other drugs are, just different hallucinogens. One in particular that causes folks to set fires, and shave their heads and paint themselves in bright colors. And so these really kind of extraordinary, unusual things that start to spring up. And as folks, I think, are also responding to the societal collapse, the ways in which the humans are coping with that. Certain cul-de-sac or communities that are what we know now as gated communities have now become more walled communities, where instead of gates, there are walls where these folks have to coexist inside these neighborhoods where they might not have previously even spoken to one another, but now they're, dealing with like resource interdependence in order to create a network for them to be in community to stay alive. They're forming schools, and churches and worshiping together just for the sake of being with, not necessarily because they have so much of a shared ideology, right? So we're noticing some similarities based off where we are right now, and those parallels, I think, kind of led me further and further into the book to want to follow Lauren through her journey and experiences. I think that the recent fires at the beginning of this month in Los Angeles, sent a second shockwave through the fans of the Parable series, where we started to see another uptick in people being like, no, but you have to go read this book, because in 2025, the fire breaks out that causes, it was the catalyzing event that causes Lauren to actually have to leave to set out on her own in the book. That same parallel started to be struck up with the LA fires and what we saw. And folks got really, I guess, excited and started a whole nother social media discussion about, Octavia Butler being a prophet. And I'm like, yes, and not just because of this book, not just because of this thing, and also continue to read the book, and to think critically about what the larger message here is, because Butler said that this was a warning. It was a warning of what could happen if we continue to engage in, these dehumanizing behaviors and destroying the earth in the way that we would. There would be consequences for it. And this book basically gives a roadmap to those consequences. And I think we just maybe got a little, it was like sensationalized a little bit by the Make America Great Again and the fires. And we're still missing the message of, no, pay attention. I gave you a handbook. I wrote two of them to tell you exactly how to avoid these similar outcomes. And I sometimes am a little concerned that maybe we're still not paying attention. Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna jump in, Ebony, because you know I think one of the real problems of our current age is context collapse, which you were talking about. Um, like, so yeah, here's a snippet from the book, here's a quote, whatever, but it's like it's part of a whole, right? And so like you can make a social media post or you can have your little like kiki over some shit in the book that feels like especially salient given the times that we're living through, but like it is a whole text, and I feel like, as somebody who writes for a living, like I don't want somebody taking just the pieces that like might pop off on social media and using it to build an audience off of that, right? Like it's a whole work that has a purpose to serve. And if you just take out the parts that, seem the shiniest, then you're doing a disservice to the work. So I'm glad you said that. And we all see what misinformation wrought by context collapse can do to a society. We're living through it right now.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that's, really I think important to talk about with Octavia Butler's writing and these books in particular is like, yeah, we say prophet, 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 prophecy, but it's not, I think, the stereotypical idea of what people think about prophecy in terms of looking into the future, like imagining something that's going to happen, 10, 15, 100 years from now. No, it's more like reckoning with the present and recognizing the cyclical nature
Yeah.
of the threats and the problems and the systems that endanger us as individuals and people collectively as a society, right? So, the name of the political party that is coming into power in a rightward shift in these books is Christian America, right? And is very much about using Christianity as a cudgel to smash and separate people in society. So there's a lot of, conservatism, big and little c, in terms of the political platforms that these politicians are offering to the people. And because those platforms are being framed within a context of crisis, America sucks and we need to make it great again, which is the same, messaging that Trump and his acolytes are peddling, despite certain facts on the ground uh, saying otherwise. If you're looking at economic analysis and some other things, um, the dangers are not quite as raw as they're being presented as, but you make people scared and then you tell them you have a solution, and then that's the one way to build power. And Octavia talks about that in the book, obviously. But there's other things, like technological advancements as a way to anesthetize people and keep them disengaged from what's happening around them. So that way, those who seek power, uh, can get it through immoral means. That's something else that flows through the book. But like the other thing that I think that's so important to me in reading these books is where Octavia locates joy in these stories. And I find it's most often in community, like when Lauren, the main character of these books, is out on her own or has to think about moving through the world by herself. Those are the moments where we as readers, and I think as people individually in the world, like get the most shook, right? When she's on those highways and she's having to strategize around, do I engage physically with a threat? Because if I hurt somebody who's trying to hurt me, my sharing talent will mean that I'm feeling his pain, right? Um, how do I find other people and how do I trust them? Can I let them know about my special talent? Can I let them know about Earthseed? Like, when is it safe? And when she finally does find community and build community of her own, um, those are the best parts of the book, like when they're talking about the recipes that they cook and the vegetables, and you were talking about um, some of the stuff that people overlook. And I think the conversations around sustainability and permaculture, like growing your own food, self-sustaining societies. And I say this as somebody who's not terribly good at this stuff, but I recognize the importance of it, like as a way to build a life that is not totally controlled by late stage capitalism. We need to figure out alternatives, and the alternatives can be small. They can start on a communal, like subdivision level, like the place where Lauren grows up. You can start there and create some safety and some space for different kind of experiences because, I think one of the big lessons from these books, and honestly, the times we're living through, is like capitalism doesn't care about you. Capitalism only cares about profit, and is it's an Ouroboros that like impoverishes anybody that's not within the circles of power.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Y'all gotta let me know if I'm talking too much.
No, I'm right there with you. I was thinking about, these pockets of joy that get created from just like being. I think it's in Parable of the Talents where she talks about, so it's like they're 5 years in, they're starting to get settled. And she's like, I'm going to pick up drawing. Now I'm going to do so. I'm going to do it with intention. And the children are writing plays, and this one is directing, and this one's come up with a comedic, routine. They're making art for the sake of art, like literally finding like currency outside of money, and being able to be in this very real exchange of time and energy and attention and affection, like really building intimate relationships and bonds and having, discussions that are encouraged, and where everyone is heard and has a voice and receives a share. It's kind of like this socialist utopia, but it's not without, like, I think there's also a part where she talks about it does get better in the sense that people adjust. So, we are probably going to have to um, separate ourselves, or go through our own. It's kind of like with the TikTok shutdown, right? Like, y'all, that wasn't shit. TikTok was down for like less than 12 hours, and y'all were like really ready. Y'all were crashing out behind it, right? But like, I need you to understand that these things are fleeting. And the
Hmm.
message that we're being given, that's being, the propaganda is telling us, is that y'all don't run this. We do. We'll give you access to it when we say so, for you to use it how we say use it, so that we can extract the resources that we need, because that's how capitalism works. And I think for folks who are not used to being a member of any oppressed class, are really having a difficult time realizing that, like, me too. And it's like, yeah, you too. Capitalism doesn't give a damn about you, your mama, your grandmama. Nobody, it doesn't care about any of us. It actually thrives on, the souls of what I mean, of human beings. And so this idea that, like, there's a guarantee of discomfort and displacement, um, maybe disaster, doom and dread. Like, I think when I hear people talk about the book, some of the things that I've heard is like, oh, it's so heavy. I had to put it down. It was too heavy. And it's like, yeah, guess what? Life is hard. It's really hard. Earth is hard, to stay on this planet. Shout out to gravity, but every other part of it is some bullshit. Like, so yes, it is difficult, and we may have to, like, you know, Malcolm X said there is no such thing as a bloodless revolution. So there will be these challenges, these things that we do not, that are not comfortable. But comfort isn't a, is a privilege and a structure that was created by white supremacists to make you think that you're better than somebody else. You know what I mean? So like, all of as these systems are collapsing, they're also collapsing, the internal institution, the internal colonizer, the systems that you have built inside yourself to justify our addiction to, the trappings and benefits of capitalism. All will have to fall away, and you might have to throw your shit in a knapsack and go walk down a highway for 12 days and hope you don't die. And then what? And I feel like if people felt like the stakes were actually that high, they might govern themselves a little bit differently today. And I think that that's what Octavia Butler was trying to tell us, but we still can't hear that because, give us back our TikTok. It's like, whew. So I want more of us to understand just how powerful we are, and how capable we are, and that humans were designed to survive and even get to a place of thriving. But the systems that don't serve us, we gotta be prepared to let them go, or to tear them down or burn them or whatever. I don't know. And nobody wants to do that. I like my manicures and my nice things, but there might come a time where I can't take none of this shit with me, you
And
know?
y'all can't
So
see these manicures, but they are nice. I want to say that, like, you're talking about the systems, and like the thing about the perspectives that Octavia offers in these books is that, yeah, we have to interrogate these systems, because one of the things that these systems do is that um, they turn us against each other.
Mhm.
Minor spoiler, well, major spoiler here, but like one of the main conflicts that happens in these books is Lauren finding a brother that she thought was dead and him being all in on Christian Americanism. And that creates a fracture between them that exists for the rest of their lives, you know? And, um, you know, again, it is irony is probably not the word, but it is chilling to be living through a moment where we have material evidence of people voting against not only their own interests, but voting against their own family, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So you have people who, or immigrant communities voting for a rabidly anti-immigrant racist politician and thinking somehow their loyalty will make them exempt. And guess what? It doesn't, you know? And again, part of Octavia's prophecy, if we can call it that, is like looking on the cycles of history and seeing, oh, this cycle's not dead. It's going to self-perpetuate because the societal construct that we live inside of needs to self-perpetuate, right? You know, like capitalism always demands an exploited class, right? An underclass, right? And part of the work of capitalism and those who worship at its altar is to make sure that some people are always going to be in the underclass, while also promising you can make it to the upper classes, to the ruling classes, right? So like the scramble to climb on top of each other is what winds up causing these societal collapses, what winds up causing these frictions and everything else that threatens the characters in those books and in this world.
Mm. Yeah, man. It's one of the things that was so not only, I mean, because we're doing spoilers, but like in addition to the conflict and the fallout, I mean, there was tension with Lauren and her brothers throughout the book, but that heartbreak, or both books, but that severance of relationship, and then on top of that, Larkin, Larkin's, I guess the position, her posture toward her mother was devastating. I was like, oh my God, the baby. But it also just, the people who, it's like the girls who get it, and the girls who don't, right? So like when we're talking about Earthseed, the cognitive dissonance that takes place when someone is like, but what do you mean God is change? Like God
Yeah, let's
is
get
this,
into Earthseed.
As a
okay.
That's
philosophy,
beautiful.
yeah.
Yeah, let's
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
extra
So like,
spell that out a little bit.
so are, the parable of the sower opens with a scripture. Like it's like the at every point, and it's so fascinating to know, do people just skip that part? Do they not read it? Do they think it's like a, like, I don't understand, because the scriptures or verses of Earthseed throughout Parable of the Sower basically punctuate the chapters and sections. They organize the book, right? By the time we make it to Parable as Talents, Earthseed has been like published, and she's continuing to develop on these ideas and is actually delivering sermons, and has now like 66 plus people living on this commune on their land together. So it has become a thing, which she also later finds out has something that is being clocked by the fundamentalist Christian right as being a devil worshiping cult. So the divisive tendencies of the ruling class to make sure that they keep us in these silos is something that is working overtime throughout both texts, in addition to the cognitive dissonance that takes place when you start talking about God that exists in any other way beyond the Christian white Jesus. Like, that's when, I mean, like, that's not who we're talking about, then we're not talking about God by dominant cultural expectations. I also want to say that Lauren's middle name is Oya. Oya is the Orisha of Yoruba religious traditions, Ifa. This Orisha is a goddess, or goddess, godlike energy, in which Ifa is a monotheistic culture, there's one god, Olodumare. The Orishas are not gods themselves, but they're avatars or manifestations of God's energy through natural plane, right? Oya is one of them. Oya is the mother of nine. Nine is her number, which signifies completion. And also the goddess of change, the winds, the storm, change, and the guardian of the graveyard and the marketplace. So she is tending this exchange of like heaven and the exchange of heaven and earth, of being here and in the beyond. So she's very grounded, but also very tumultuous, and will like shapeshift throughout in order to make the needs of whatever the current situation or circumstance is. And if shit's not shaken, she'll tear it all down and start over again, right? So this very powerful there's also like a little there's a West African lineage in Lauren's family line. Her father is Nigerian. So that is like one of those like Easter eggs that's in it. That's like, that means something. Her name being Oya means something for the work that she's doing as she's creating Earthseed and this religion, this religious belief system that is actually empowering people to understand that God is change. Everything you touch, you change, and everything that you change changes you. So there's this like relational interdependence between you and the world around you and all the people in it that's wrapped up in this body of this woman who is also gifted with this talent of being able to feel and share feelings. Her role that she takes on as she starts to spread the doctrine and teach more around Earthseed is she is the shaper. She is a shaper. So she is shaping God. And I mean, like, why is that not what we're talking about when we talk about the books? Like all that other shit, yeah, sure. But like this internal clarity of self inquiry and really,
Improvement, evolution, realization. Yeah.
yes, all of that is like, it feels so complete, and makes everything about the harrowing realities that they're experiencing feel more possible, because you understand that like Earthseed is guiding. There's something beyond and within that is guiding them along this journey that allows me to feel very hopeful throughout the entire series, which I'm like, I don't know, it excites me. As you can see, I'm very excited by it, but that excites me about Earthseed.
I wanted to read one of the little verses. It's actually the first page of the first book. It's dated 2024. Uh, Prodigy is at its essence adaptability and persistent positive obsession. Without persistence, what remains is an enthusiasm of the moment. Without adaptability, what remains may be channeled into destructive fanaticism. Without positive obsession, there is nothing at all. And, the next thing is actually the beginning of the first chapter, and and Ebony kind of paraphrased it a little bit. I just want to read it verbatim. All that you touch, you change. All that you change changes you. The only lasting truth is change. God is change. And so I wanted to talk about like those, like let's just call them verses, and the like political utility, socio-political, cultural utility we might find in them now, because the slogan of the moment in the book and in our reality, make America great again. And that's like, well, is that forward-looking change? Is that positive obsession? Um, it looks backward, and there's, a lie encased in that slogan, because it's like, well, when was America great? Who was it great for?
That
Um,
part.
and you know, that doesn't get interrogated when we talk about this as a slogan that animates a certain strata of people in the United States political ecosystem. And the other thing is like, one of the things that capitalism requires is a status quo to create that underclass to be exploited. And when you talk about change in a capitalistic framing, it's, well, change is an asset that you need to pay for to access, right? who gets to go to college, who gets to afford health care. And if we change who can access these fundamental human rights, then uh-oh, the ruling class may not be so ruling anymore. That's why you see opposition to things like the Affordable Care Act. That's why you see oppositions to, federally subsidized publication, nationwide. And when you look at the things that are being targeted by these ultra capitalist neo-fascists, that's why. It's because the kind of change that we might make for ourselves to create a more just world, a more fair world, is not the kind of change that they want us to be able to initiate. So,
Hmm.
you know, Lauren writing and conceiving of Earth's seed as a philosophy, and Octavia, all I think all comes from Octavia looking at history, and again
Hmm.
recognizing these cycles and seeing how they perpetuate and why they perpetuate. So it's really important to think about, oh, okay, what kind of changes are people afraid of making and why?
Hmm. Yeah. I think all of them. I don't know. I think, you know, change is the only guarantee that you got. And we spend so much time resisting it, like I, I think sometimes like with the Make America Great Again, and that not being interrogated to be like, well, what does that mean? Is also a function of like the context collapse where people are like, it doesn't matter, it's just words, like we forget words mean things. But I I also think that it's important for us to continue to offer a counter narrative, for us to exist in ways that are proof positive of the insanity that is that circus that is happening down to the White House. I think it's important for us to keep an eye and an ear tuned to what is happening, because I don't think I think that the obvious nature of their like statements, the attention, the media control, the way that everyone wants to be seen and noticed and show up in their finest for the function, that's actually to our advantage, because we can see it and then interrogate it and then make decisions to move accordingly. And that is where the change comes in. So instead of going along with the status quo, we can actually, be brave and courageous and say, okay, you went left, I'm gonna shake and move right. You know what I mean? Or whatever intuitive powers or strengths we need to use to make the decisions about what our next choice is. I think we can really be encouraged to be more willing to change, like having this will to say like, I changed my mind, I used to believe that, but the evidence of my lived experience is that that actually is false, so I am going to change and get curious about this other opportunity that is available to me and see what the outcome is there. I That is actually really radical, and exactly what capitalism does not want us to do. So I highly encourage more of us to change. Um,
I
and
mean,
yeah.
I don't want to step on you, Ebony, but like I think it's not a coincidence as we're talking about change and the metaphorical and actual real world political power of creating change. I think it's not a mistake. It's not an accident that, one of the targets of this rightward shift in American politics are trans brothers and sisters, right? Like,
Mhm.
these are people who have a truth of themselves that they are trying to live in the real world and manifest. And these people who are opposed to them are like, no, they go biblical, they go biological, they go, they try to ground their regressiveness in all these different paradigms. But what they're really saying is, no, you don't get to control your lives. We do. And we get to
Mhm.
define your lives. And I think, change is easy to craft a slogan around, but it's harder to manifest. And I think one thing you can say about, again, our trans brothers and sisters is they are doing extremely hard work to manifest change in their own lives individually without hurting anybody, um, but are still being told, no, we don't want you to exist. And that
Yeah.
is, again, to talk about the cyclical nature of history and these oppressions, black people keep getting told that same shit still, into 2025 and other marginalized groups. It's you're not allowed to change your circumstances. We are.
Yeah. I mean, to that point, to our trans relatives, gender being the social construct that it is, there has not been a time in any indigenous or historical society where there were not two-spirited like folks who existed in beyond a binary of male and female. So like the existence of our trans siblings is the persistence of humanity. Like that's where it goes. So even again, because of the unnatural necessity of capitalism to dehumanize us, there will always be these hiccups that fly in the face of, what they need to in order to continue to extract our labor, our energy, our time, our spirits, all of these things from us and distort our realities. But like again, it's like if you tell a lie long enough, then it becomes the truth. And so they just keep lying about it. And unfortunately, because of the power and, whatever, it becomes this dominant cultural narrative where we're like, oh, you're wrong. And this guy is right because he looks like me, because he looks like my daddy, because we've always been right, because we believe that we must be better, because, you know what I mean? And it all shifts right back into this machine that's been built to extract the souls of humans on Earth. And I think that it's about time to dismantle the machine inside, and look at how we do that to the one on the outside as well. But me first, us first.
Mm. So much good stuff. I'm thinking too from something you said, Ebony, about there's a verse in the parable of the talents about like telling a lie, believing your lie, defending your lie, and then being unable to accept another truth because your like identity has basically become like you've been defending. So like now you can't go backwards. And it felt so powerful in the midst of all this that like, this Trump was elected once and that did not like it's amazing that so many people are like, give me more of that. And just this inability to do that work of change and to like ask yourself, is this really where I want to stay? For like one element of it. And I'm also thinking about Lauren's like we talk, you mentioned it as a handbook, and I want to get into that a little bit either now or in a minute, but like part of it is not only like how she and this community move through this time, but it's like to me also feels like the exposure to the harshness of the story is kind of part of a little bit of like the preparation and a way of like yeah, it's heavy and there's some really really dark shit here, but there's also dark shit all around us right now if anyone hasn't noticed. And when Octavia Butler was asked how she came up with like these scenarios of the future, she was like, I just thought about what's going on now and I gamed it out 30 years and there you go. And like there's this unwillingness, it seems collectively, because we're so bought into the paradigm that corporate like mega corporations have created for us and all of the oppressive systems have created for us that like um yeah, there's so much unawareness of like how some of our everyday actions just like reinforce and re-empower those systems. Another thing is that like watching Lauren move through this journey and like the texts that we're reading are her journals. Like she is constantly engaged in self-reflection and like writing down her story and like processing her experience. And it feels like her verses, her doctrine, her philosophy is informed by her deep connection to the world around her. Like she's watching how much is changing. And this is like where this notion of God as change is coming from. Like it's not, she isn't divinely visited by some deity or something. Like she's just incredibly aware and incredibly self-aware and constantly in this process of self-awareness. And she's teaching the people in her community all of the time, like how to practice this awareness, especially when they're in very difficult situations. It's like, I mean, spoiler, they end up in like in enslavement through a technological device that puts collars on people and can inflict pain on them by the simple touch of a button. And they're like she's encouraging all of them when they realize that this has happened to them. It's like we need to study everyone around us and find like watch what they're doing so we can figure out how we can move. And that seems like part of her incredible talent as a leader is to like help her community engage with like the present that's in front of them and some of their own like self-reflection. And sorry, that was probably like a messy uh assortment salad of things. Y'all have given so much to the conversation that I'm like picking up on. And a couple things I think I want to hear more about are like what you make of the journaling, just journaling as the practice, the delivery of the text, and then, maybe like how you see this functioning as a handbook or like what you take from it as uh like and it's, what she calls her book of verses is the books of the living, which I find very beautiful. And this, the notion of earth seed as like she's constantly kind of planting seeds wherever she goes. And I've jumbled my question further, but yeah, where do you want to pick it up from there?
No, I appreciate it. It's good to it's good. I appreciate the reflection. I feel like maybe my message from from Octavia Butler is that I should be journaling more. I, I tend to not fancy my life or my thoughts that important, you know what I mean? Or sometimes I think I am so caught up in technology that I forget to the magic of writing, and what how powerful of a tool of manifestation that is, and a way to reconnect and like be in a state of meditation. And like I was thinking of, even her on the highway in these journeys, like still taking time to document some of these most atrocious days that have happened. And I'm like, yeah, I guess you could do that if you didn't have a cell phone in your hand. You know what I mean? Like, if we could just put the pacifiers down, where we would be able to find grounding. So that's one of the things that I think, just for me myself, I'm like, what would that look like for me to be more intentional about writing narrative? My internal capitalist said, well, that is because we live in a society, Ebony, where we think that everything that we make, we got to sell.
Mm-hmm.
And so that goes back to the humanizing effect of just making art for art's sake because it's what humans do, or singing a song to soothe our vagus nerve because that's what it's there for. You know what I mean? Like, so yeah. If I shift out of, is it marketable? Is it part of my brand message? Does it fit on a reel? Is it 30 seconds long? Like, if I'm not thinking about that and just putting pen to paper and pouring out the day, then yeah, I think some really wonderful things could take place. That is probably some medicine for me that I need. But see, I don't even be listening sometimes because my capitalist is like, how we gonna make that money, girl?
It's so internalized. Like it works. It really, really works. And I just want to add on to that like all of us right now are living through wild, wild shit. And there's gonna be more of it. And we're each, like with climate change in particular, going to experience that in similar but different ways based on our like bioregions and our environments and our infrastructure and all of that. And like just the value of, like you said, like TikTok isn't going to be here forever, and all the digital shit isn't going to last forever in whatever iteration of it we're addicted to in the moment. And I think this book also gives us a lot about like legacy and intergenerational wisdom. And there's certainly like lots of complications with that and lots of fracture with that. But like, you know, we're all witnessing some really crazy shit, and just writing it down will not only help you like figure out how you want to respond to it, but also create a record that like, yeah, it doesn't feel valuable because you don't need to like make it into a book or try to sell it, but could have incredible value to descendants perhaps, or just other people who are trying to get through this shit.
Yeah, it's a really good reminder.
The only thing I have to add to all of that is, capitalism, I think, discourages us from reckoning with our own interiority, because if you start to ask yourself, well, the commercials say I should be happy, but your boy's not happy, then you start to interrogate other things which may not be true when compared to the messaging that we get from mainstream media and other kind of social outlets. Reckoning with your own interiority, um, is radical because it's just you and yourself, and in the case of journaling, the page, and it can be a place where you block out all the messaging, all the norms and the prompts that you get from, you know, mainstream society. And when you're a marginalized person, whether it's black, queer, or whatever, um, doing that and forming your own sense of yourself, um, a self that can run counter to this programming, um, is work that, like I said, can be really dangerous to the people who want to keep you in a certain position on the like socio-political ladder.
Yeah, definitely.
And
Definitely.
as has been noted on this podcast and elsewhere, since it is a tarot podcast, in part, the year of the hermit. So 2 + 0 + 2 + 5 is 9, which Ebony has informed us is a very magical number in this book, though that is not explicitly pointed out. So yeah, this like what's going on inside of you with you. What do you believe? What kind of world are you wanting to see? And how can all of us kind of like wake up to that and resist in our own ways? I feel like a lot of people are waiting for like someone else to start the revolution, and then they'll decide if it's safe for them to get involved, or I don't know. But like it's
I'm gonna tell you right now,
time.
it's not safe. It's not
No,
safe. There's no
no.
such thing as safety. There's you know, we used to say this in the remember DEI guys. When I used to work in that space for a while, safe spaces were like a buzzword, like a friend. We want to be in a safe space. This is a safe space. No, it's not. And I can't think of the scholar who pose the shift, but we can't guarantee safe spaces, but we do encourage brave spaces, which is where you acknowledge the fact that this shit is scary and then you choose to do it anyway. Like you do it scared. And I think that it's never going to be safe. And I don't know that we even have the like who I guess who are we waiting for, right?
Right.
And what if we look at at Butler being the patternist that she is, if we look at the patterns on this here Martin Luther King Jr. Day, let's not forget that he was assassinated as an enemy of the state. You know what I mean? Like overwhelming majority of Americans were anti MLK. on the day that he died. And now those same people, the far right, evangelical, anti-Black AF card toting racists will quote MLK to your face and ask you to judge them on the content of their character. And it's like, excuse me, that I still find that to be shit. So that is what I'm judging. But, like we keep yeah, I got distracted by the content of the way that MLK has been bastardized, but
Yeah,
but
it's a
still,
hard thing
It's
not to
distracting.
like get derailed by. Yeah.
I got a little distracted. I'm like, I'm mad all over again. Like, I hate it. But we just we don't need safety. The pattern of us choosing our leaders, when we choose and identify a leader to prop up and put out as like this is the person who's going to go first, I think that we have a distorted idea around what leadership means. We think that leader is a role or a title that you were given, and leadership is a characteristic and behavioral that it's a behavior of how we engage in community, how we navigate, how we can't lead ourselves nowhere, and also are really stuck in our egos where we're like, can't nobody tell me nothing. So are you really waiting for somebody? Who would that person be? And guess what? The most audacious, loudest, obnoxious asshole walked up to the stage and said, "It me. I'll say whatever I'll be that guy." And the Luddites of the world were like, "Ooh,
It's not just the
ooh."
Luddites, as evidenced by the new cronies in a circle. These are tech bros who, again,
Right? Yeah.
have access to buttons and levers that can change the way people think about things.
Yeah.
When you were talking about MF with the FBI and rather when you talk about MLK and the way his legacy's been bastardized for political purposes by the right, it reminded me of the old Twitter, pre-Elon Twitter, where you could still change your display name, and Jabuki White, the comedian, changed his display name to the FBI. And the tweet was, just because we killed him doesn't mean we can't miss him. And like it's but yeah, but we're laughing, but that's the reality,
Yeah.
like the reality is what gets popularized in that kind of messaging is a Martin Luther King who didn't care about labor and justice, which he did. His last campaign was a poor people's campaign, and it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't premised on racial prejudice. It was premised on economic injustice. And um, the power of political operators and their like intendant machinery, whether it's TikTok or Twitter or whatever, like the power of them to control what huge swaths of the population think and believe, um, is something we need to guard against. And I think again, Octavia wrote about that in these books. When she talked about the news discs that people would get, um, and the varying quality of the offerings, and the dream masks, which are an analog to VR and augmented reality and stuff. Like, yeah,
The
these are all,
Cybertrucks,
yeah, yeah.
the
The-
Cybertruck, yeah.
yeah, the maggots, the like basically like the Hummers of that world. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and
Indestructible,
yeah,
highly
indestructible,
weaponized,
exactly.
full
So
surveillance, like
yeah, yeah, armed with guns and whatnot. So, and we again, this is before the increasing militarization of our police departments. And, you know, all of this is premised on fear, on economic exploitation. And again, if you don't really interrogate that stuff in your journaling, in your creativity, in the way you reach out to community or not, then it may seem like a surprise. But Octavia was again just paying attention to what was happening in her present moment and what happened in the past. Like um, jingoism has always been a tool for the capitalist class and societies, you know,
Mhm.
like our nation above all else. And it's like, no, you can't even imagine coexistence. It has to be dominance. And that's
Mhm.
what, you know, we see in the political messaging of Donald Trump's like post-election um rallies, you know. He's talking about annexing Greenland and Canada. And it's like, what? Why? You know.
Which in this book, there is a war with Canada and Alaska, which is
Mhm.
seceding from the Union. And um, speaking of militarization of the cops, in this book, you have to pay the cops to help you. Like that's a
Yeah.
fee for service institution. And there are also like poverty and unemployment is basically criminalized. Like everyone in their little existing insular communities is trying to like get rid of vagrants, which are, there aren't great jobs. Like you're either able to take care of yourself and trade with people, or you gather money here and there. And some other people have these like extra economic forms of like commerce. But the other alternative is to go live in a corporate city where you make very little money and everything in the stores are expensive and the corporation pays you in their currency and you can't leave until you pay off your debts to the corporation. So there's
Mhm.
like all these forms of basically like enslavement that are the results of the militarization, the technological development, and like corporate power, along with the societal collapse that all of these things created.
Mhm. As we see, I think recently Costco launched a sample of Costco housing where they have like an apartment complex built above a Costco. And another tech company that had postured the same thing, which um, when it, thinking about the patterns in, I don't know, I'm gonna butcher the year, but there is the in Ludlow, Colorado, there was a site called the Ludlow Massacre where it was actually pre-union miners who were working for the mining company, but were only being paid in the company
Script.
currency,
Yeah,
in
script.
script currency. Ultimately, there ended up being a huge massacre where they murdered the people following their uprising to demand fair wages in Colorado. So, like, it was another pattern that Butler was like, this will come back. You know what I mean? This will come back. And here we have it again, these things repeating themselves. And or at least signaling to the possibility or likelihood of a repetitive cycle. And, you know, I like to think every round goes higher. So hopefully we're not circling the drain in that. And I think that with certain shifts of like our attention and energy, we can perhaps cycle at a higher vibration this time around if we must.
Please, please, please.
You know, like, and I think about it like, if you walk outside, when we have the devices in our hands and are looking at all of this constantly, like that is an unnatural amount of information that I don't know that the human brain is equipped to process. We're dealing with, like you said earlier, Cecily, some like wild realities.
When
But
we
I
were built
wonder,
to look or like respond to the
yeah,
environment we're in, to like hear the birds, look at the street, how's moving this way, that, like where should I be?
yeah,
Where's
like
the
go
water?
outside. Yeah,
Sorry, go ahead.
no, I mean that was the exact thing I'm saying. Like I feel like one of the ways that we get there is by putting our phones down and going outside. You know what I mean? Like I think that it's on some level just that simple at the very least for us to get like a reality check of being like, oh, so nothing is on fire here. Like there is a library there. There's water in a nature preserve right here. Like, I would like for these things to remain. How might I be able to be a good steward of them? Who is the lady who lives next door? Let me exchange phone numbers with her and speak to my neighbors in the morning. Like, I think that just the lack of eye contact and human interaction and the way that we only see ourselves through mirrorless screens is something that is distorting. It's also robbing us of our humanity in these very like micro ways that are going to lead to some macro changes that will
Consequences,
come,
yeah.
consequences that are going to come whether we like them or not, if we don't reclaim our humanity. And like that's literally all we can reclaim. Like that is what we have the ultimate power of doing, is like reclaiming our connection to source energy, to the earth, to our own stories, to our bodies, to our breath, to our emotions, like really getting back in the bag of being a human being, and then being like, oh, anything that exists to make me feel other than human is probably not good for me. And so I would resist that thing, as opposed to consuming the thing that makes me feel like a bad human, or worse, and then betraying my own humanity constantly, because then it makes it easier for me to engage in some of the strategies that characters in the books do, where you start to use people as implements or objects of oppression, as opposed to seeing them for the humans that they are. But I don't know.
So wise, beautiful advice. Everyone, do what Ebony said, please.
Go outside. Go outside. Go
And
meet
enjoy
one
it while
neighbor.
you can. It may not always be there. And if you like it, yes, please fight for it by not buying new iPhones, or yeah, volunteering for habitat preservation, or I don't know, there's like 1,000 jillion different ways.
Do you know what's radicalizing me right now? I kid you not. At my apartment complex, my building is next to the recycling center, which is basically a fancy word for dumpster. Um, and it is like a cinder block walled off kind of like labyrinth space that they have like these recycling bins inside and a huge trash compactor. Y'all, the amount of shit that people put in this bin is, I'm I am upset all the time. I'm like, where is the trash going? Where is it coming from? How many fucking TVs do we need to? After
Thank you.
Christmas, it was insane.
Oh,
The boxes, the plastics, the thing, and then people just throw shit. There's also like no care with even how it's discarded. And then you have like, there's folks who sort through the trash, like pull up, I don't know if they're dumpster diving or like if it's thrifting or whatever, recycle, whatever they're doing. So then that's a wave of folks who come. And then the recycling people come, but they only take the bins and leave the boxes. And then the land, like there's so much energy that goes into sorting through the refuse of the human. And I'm like, we can't possibly need this much shit. So I'm currently being radicalized by the lack of organization and structure around how we discard of trash in this entire apartment complex, and it makes me angry. And I sometimes want to stand outside and just like chastise people about breaking down their boxes.
preach, preach, preach.
That's what's happening. I'm like that lady in the community that's like, put that away. Like, oh, like you have to open the trash compactor and then close the door. Don't leave the trash sitting out there. There's animals. Like, it's just, oh, it's a mess. I'm obviously uptight about that, but go outside, see what you find. That's some shit that I can actually really, that's not something that I see scrolling on my phone. That's something that requires me to
Yeah,
have
look
conversations with
around.
people and do things outside to like manage the trash site. Oh God, it's so annoying. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me started just about the plastic black bags that are just blowing everywhere. Like everyone's just, I mean, it's like it's in our bodies now, my friends. Like, how do you
Yeah.
think it got there? Can we just put our shit in, and can we have less shit to like
Yeah.
throw away all the time?
Whew.
Um, we are coming to about 2 hours in this conversation. Is there anything else that feels important to say, explore for you? What did we miss? What else needs to be here?
I want to talk a little bit about the imagery and thematics of slavery in these books because
Mhm.
it's not subtle and it doesn't
Mm.
need to be subtle because, again, these books can be read as critiques of capitalism and exploitative systems that engender capitalism. In the book, One of the kind of paradigms of servitude that are manifested are these collars, which are control collars that are placed around a human being's neck and can deliver pain um, without impacting like the everyday functionality of the person's body, right? So you can get a shock, it'll hurt like worse than anything you've ever experienced in your life, but you can still work the next day or the next hour. And you know, Octavia does not shy away from calling it slavery and not linking it directly to the chattel slavery that Black people experience in this country and abroad. And but then there's also like child slavery and exploitation. Um, and again, it is a chilling parallel to certain things we're seeing in the United States right now, right? Whether it's incarcerated firefighters fighting the wildfires in California. Some of those wildfires are basically very adjacent to Pasadena, California, where Octavia Butler grew up. So again, more coin coincidences that are disturbing. But the incarcerated firefighters, we're seeing children working in meatpacking plants again, which is something we haven't seen since the turn of the 20th century. You know, before different laws and regulations were put into place to prevent that kind of thing. So, you know, again, capitalism requires an exploited underclass to function, and when we see certain protections being rolled back, whether it's bodily autonomy and femme identifying people, child labor, um, underpaid labor coming from the prison industrial complex, like these are all things that are like warning signs as to the decay of like really empathy in our societal fabric, which is so important, right? You know, the people that want to be in charge nowadays, to my mind and my vision, really require that we don't care about each other. That's
Mhm.
just like a given. They don't want us to give a damn about each other. And once that's agreed upon, some evil befalling your neighbor doesn't matter that much because it's not touching you. And when we talk about the best ideals that America was founded on, that's one of them. Like working together towards a common good betters all of our lives. But the belief in that very simple preset, which has been proven historically, not just in this country but other places, like for that belief to be on the wane means that like a lot more dangerous things are going to happen, like if you are a US born citizen and want to deny the avenues of naturalization and citizenship to other people, then not only are you being um lacking compassion, but you're being ahistorical, you know? Like the people who we think of as white nativism is a thing in this country, right? Where like white people came from Europe and and created this identity of the real American in order to further certain political aims. And like when you say go back to where you came from, if you're one of them, then you're just erasing huge chunks of American history. And um, really, I think trying to manifest a more venal kind of humanity that you can profit off of. Sorry, I feel like I got on a soapbox there, but it makes me really angry. I'm a child of immigrants, so um, it's a little bit personal for me. But yeah, it's infuriating to think about how you know there's a new kind of slavery waiting to happen, and not waiting, it is happening.
Mhm.
And people in power don't want you to think about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I I really appreciate that. I like a good soapbox moment. um, Slavery is a theme. Is maybe even a I don't know, a function or character, a tool throughout Butler's work. Like it shows up in many different places in her work, and the way that currently in this country the history of enslavement and the creation of capitalism, or the setting the stage for capitalism being a descendant of enslaved Africans um is also, it's like a that thing that gets stuck in my throat when I think about, when I watch the history of enslavement be ignored and obfuscated, and like, we're not having conversations about reparations. Ha, please, you know what I mean? Like whatever way that we can use, from dismantling, from banning books and dismantling DEI programs, and, gutting affirmative action, and, just all of the different things that the ways in which I'm going to call it whiteness is protecting itself, um, isn't just, I think for a long time I was like, well, can't they, why can't they acknowledge this? And it's because it's not finished. The project is not complete. They didn't have a contingency plan for what to do following the Civil War. So everything has kind of been like, everything that has happened since the Emancipation Proclamation was signed has literally been like a new idea to re-engage or to continue to capitalize off extracted labor from the most marginalized among us, which is organized in this country by race. So that kind of, in a full circle way, takes me back to what I was saying earlier about Afro-pessimism basically being this idea that Blackness can only function in the role of, with in with the in the same vein as enslavement. Like, and that is what Black means in this country, or really in the world, on a global level of, global imperialism in a capitalist global society. Blackness equates to slave, and not acknowledging that. I mean, there are Black folks that will argue me down about it. You know what I mean? Shout out to Frank Walderson, who has actually done the work, is a scholar. You know what I mean? Like there are scholars who are actually doing this work and doing this research, but that's the argument, that like this idea of enslavement is not a completed project, and it will continue to recreate new approaches or strategies to continue to keep the capitalist machine alive. That's the only way it exists. And so if you start running out of Black folks, you find a new demographic. You know what I mean? Like whether or not that's indigenous people, or, Mexican immigrants, or immigrants from Haiti, or, you know what I mean? Like anybody in the sub-Saharan region of the world, like then will continue to go up. Okay, so then there'll be women, young women, white women, poor women, you know what I mean? All of these different social stratas until it reaches the top, which, coalitions among any of those groups that are not the white heteropatriarchal ruling class, coalitions and empathy and shared humanity of lived experiences inside those groups is radical. That's exactly what they don't want to see. That's what got Fred Hampton murked. You know what I mean? We are so much more powerful together than we are existing in these silos. And I really appreciate you shedding light on the way that enslavement functions here, because I think in these books, it's not racialized. We're beyond, like, I think that Butler gets us as close to a post-racial society as we can be. And if there's something that I think that we can catch up to, or maybe she was even more progressive in her thinking that we would be at least there by now, and we're not. We're still not there. We're still really hung up in the in the us and them and binaries of racialized identities. And that's sad, because I think that our liberation really lies in us shedding that identity, and also really coming up with a way for us to exist in Black bodies on this planet without the relative ideology of like us being somehow cursed sons of Ham who deserve to be enslaved, which is white Christian nationalist justification for this continuous behavior. You know what I mean? Like the shit goes so deep that it's like, you know, that we have to do some real deep excavating of the ways in which we have that is embedded into us on a cellular level, individually and collectively as a people. And I think the more folks that will get free from that, I think the we'll see exponential gains in our ability to move beyond or above it. But we didn't quite get there yet. So
I mean, that's a banger ass outro though, Ebony. Like we could just stop there.
I
I just want to be
agree.
free. That's what's up, y'all. Yeah.
I'll just add a little bit, and I know we're winding down, or we should be winding down. Like, these books are important for so many different reasons, not just because they serve as signposts to our current socio-political moment. Not just because Octavia was seemingly soothsaying when she was writing all this stuff, but because, like, for me, the biggest takeaway from these books is like collectivism will get us through the worst happenings of our times, right? Finding community and building community around shared ideals, like, and the kinds of ideals that ask us to help each other are the things not to lose sight of. It is so very hard to think that way um, in the current political moment. Like one of the things that the proliferation of social media has wrought is like main character syndrome, right? Where everybody's like trying to build a brand, build a business. And look, the three of us in this conversation are all part and parcel of our party to that, right? Like this is what we have to do in certain ways in order to make a living and meet our basic needs. But there's a mania around it in social media that seems really concerning to me. And what when you're busy pursuing that main character syndrome priorities, you're not always looking toward your neighbor in a way that's not extractive or transactional. Like this idea that you can help somebody just to help them um, is really a strong animating influence in the parable books. And there's so many times when characters meet Lauren, it's like, well, what do you get out of it? Or why are you helping me? Or whatever. And she's like, it makes my life better for you not to be a threat. Um, for you not to feel threatened by me. And yeah, there's sacrifice and humility and all of that stuff. And again, those are two ideals that mainstream society programs us to like distrust, right? Why sacrifice for somebody else? Why help somebody else? And I think those are the things that are, like you've been saying, Ebony, really liberatory about the thematics of these texts, right? It's like, yeah, you know, give a fuck about your neighbor so they don't fuck you over. I'm being obviously very crass about it, but like that's a message we need to hold onto in these times, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah. Real shit. You never know when you're gonna need somebody, but it's and it's I think it's a redeeming thing. I really like what you said about just like it helps me to show up in service, not so much just to neutralize a threat, but because you need help. And I got it. And one day I'm gonna need help. And I hope that somebody sees me who has it and they give it to me. And that when I ask for help, I have built such a community and a network that when I ask for help or articulate a need, I have people in my corner and in my community who will assist me in meeting that need. And like nobody, I have known a lot of wealthy people in my life. They are some of the stingiest motherfuckers I ever met. I mean, real talk. Like when we talk about like the fires and the billionaires and who's giving what money, and like, they broke down. They're like, so and the CEO of Starbucks makes $50,000 a minute. Like what? What? So like, I think the generosity of folks who don't have a lot, um, is really just kind of like this sort of social currency that can't be quantified, according to like dollars and cents. It's really priceless. And it's an invaluable resource that we can just like, we got to get in it and get it on us in order to be able to share it with the people who touch us. And it can be one of those things that folks I think are afraid to do. And sometimes I'm folks, it's me, sometimes I'm afraid to do that. I have my very human anxieties and challenges and whatever, trust issues and all of that. But every day I am working to be more human, and more intentional in my humanness, in my humanity, to be able to see it in myself and other people. And I want more folks to do the same.
We all are two beautiful, wise, amazing humans. And I am so, so grateful that you were willing to have this very important, very rich, very inspiring conversation. And I want to also note around these books that this is a story of someone who has a vision for herself, for her community, for the world, and she does not know how to achieve it. She is grappling with doubt along the way and so many obstacles, but she is connected to that vision, which comes from her imagination. And imagination does not live in our phones or in the shit that we buy. It is in us. It is something we share with each other. I know that my imagination is ignited by the conversation I've had tonight with Ebony and Evan. And I hope your imagination, listener, is also sparked as well. And I want to say that, like, we should all be preppers right now. And reading this book is one way to be, these books is one way to be prepping. Don't read them only for that reason. But I do encourage people to read them and have conversations with your friends about them. And they are rich, they are beautiful, they are powerful and inspiring. And I saw the other night, I think I saw this on Instagram, so it could be wrong, but I think it's true that just kind of in the real world, um, is it prophecy? Is it strange coincidence? The like synchronicity of the text and the reality that Octavia Butler is buried in a cemetery in Altadena, the decades long Black community in near Los Angeles that was destroyed by the LA fires. And that just seemed incredibly eerie to me. And I think maybe our last order of business is to bow to the goddess Octavia E. Butler for her incredible work in so many books that are so varied, so imaginative, so focused on liberation. Ebony or Evan, is there anything final you want to say before we say
Yeah.
goodbye?
Octavia E. Butler, Ibae, is, and was not traditionally a voice that would be heard. Um, I am often curious about how we would be engaging in this work if she had she not transitioned, if she were still alive. I'm grateful to folks like Adrienne Marie Brown, who has done really gone to great lengths to uplift Butler's work and narrative and write about her, and Pauline Gumbs, and just a number of other Black women authors, writers, and scholars who continue to say her name. Um, I am so grateful that Octavia E. Butler exists in the world beyond just these books. I think what I want to say is listen to Black women. That's what I want to say. Listen to Black women. Read our books. There is a certain level of prophecy that is innately assigned, is just a part of Black girl magic. It's just what we do because we've been here before. The most marginalized among us tend to be the most aware of the realities of our oppressors because we must know them in order to secure our safety. And so someone who existed in such a marginalized identity as Octavia E. Butler, in addition to her brilliance and dedication and intentionality in her writing and what she wanted to accomplish, the way that she manifested her goals for herself, her awards, her books, the way that she wrote it down, and what she left us is priceless. And yeah, she's not the only one, though. There are so many more countless brilliant authors who do not get the shine, who are sharing works and words that will and are changing the world. So, but I'm grateful that we got to have her while we did, and so may she continue to rest in power.
I can't follow that.
Ah.
Yeah, that um yeah, we will end with that. And thank you both again. Thank you, listeners. Talk to you soon.
Bye, y'all.